Hi, welcome to Miss Richardson's U.S. History 5-Minute Lectures. This information will be U.S. History Notes 2.5, the 1920s Economic Boom. It includes information that aligns with the second section of your Unit 2 study guide. Remember, you control this lecture. Pause, write down your questions, and rewatch it as often as you need. And remember, always use your study guide to help you take your notes. Let's go ahead and get started. Not only were organized crime syndicates making money off of Prohibition, which we talked about in the last set of notes, there were many others making lots of money both legally and illegally during this time period. New technology had been created and it increased production and decreased costs. People who had saved during the war were ready to spend their money. Now, these two ideas came together to create an economic boom that was actually unprecedented at the time. People had more money than ever before, and they were ready to spend it. They'd sacrificed to support the war, and now they were ready to enjoy life. Some chose to do so by enjoying illegal alcohol, but many more actually chose to do so by purchasing goods that made life easier and more enjoyable. These goods were things like radios, washing machines, refrigerators, and cars that all became popular during this time period. These were goods that most individuals could not actually afford prior to the war, but now, with the costs dropping and wages rising, people could afford to buy these luxuries. This idea of being able to buy things that you want, not just the things you need, was a new idea in the 1920s. In the Progressive Era, most people were just busy trying to live and could not buy products just because they wanted them. But now, with this new disposable income, people could buy things they wanted. Disposable income is money that people have to spend on things they want and enjoy after they've paid for all their needs like housing and food. This idea of spending money on wants, not just needs, is called consumerism. In the 1920s, America becomes a consumer society, or a society that likes to buy things, whether they're necessary to live or not. Though the cost of all these new technologies and goods was much lower than previous costs, it was still pretty high. Most Americans did not have the cash to buy things like a car or a refrigerator outright. This led to a new phenomenon, buying on credit. People would put down a small amount of the cost, then pay portions of the cost over time. They could take the product home now with them, right now, and then pay over time in small installments. They would pay a fee for this. So buying on credit was sometimes called an installment plan because they would pay those installments. But it meant they could take it home now, they'd actually end up paying a little bit extra in the end, but they got to have their product right up front. So because this actually made the stores more money, stores were the first to sell on credit, they wanted the consumers to shop with them. They took advantage of the new technologies to bring more customers into their store. They actually began to advertise. Mass media had grown in popularity in the 20s. Not just newspapers, but billboards and radio, and stores actually used these to attract more and more customers and to sell more and more products. This led to higher and higher profits and more wealth in the country. Another area arose where Americans could buy on credit, the stock market. Previously, only the rich could afford to buy stocks. But as margin buying gained in popularity, more and more average Americans began to invest in the stock market. This was a way for anyone to get rich, and everyone wanted that to happen to them. I mean, we still do. So to buy on margin, an investor would put down a small amount, usually about 10%, of the stock price. Then when you sold the stock, they would pay the rest of the stock, the other 90%. This worked because stock prices rose steadily in the 1920s, so people made money, they were able to pay that back easily. So Americans were prospering in the 1920s. Nearly every industry experienced growth and prosperity. Factories, advertising, movies, radio, automobiles, stocks, and even illegal alcohol made money. The one group that still was struggling was farmers. Technology actually hurt most farmers because it allowed large corporate farms to develop, they lowered prices, and it drove small farmers out of business or into what's known as subsistence farming. They just farmed for themselves. So while the 1920s were booming for the rest of the country, farmers were struggling. So this is the end of US Notes 2.2. I'll see you in class with any questions you have.